Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at episode 5 from season 1, and we're going to hop back in. Before we do that, though, I want to say thank you so much for the kind words, for the perspectives, and everything that you all have thrown out into the comments section. I really appreciate it. Didn't anticipate such a positive reception to the show. There are so many React channels out there. I didn't think that I would have much of a voice, but I really appreciate you guys letting me know and showing some support for the series. Thank you, really. Now, let's actually hop in.
A fucking sketchy neighborhood, man.
You see that guy?
Is this the same alleyway that we saw Richard and Big Head walking down in episode, I think it was 2? 2? That was the one where Big Head separated?
That's Chewy Ramirez. And he's gonna do our new logo.
Oh, okay.
This is what we need. You know what I mean? Something raw. We already have kind of a shitty name, Pied Piper. But the last thing we want is 2 lowercase p's in a square like those motherfuckers across the freeway would make. This is what we want.
So you gonna give me stock options or what?
What?
Yeah, you know Dave Cho? He did all the murals over at Facebook. He got a stock option deal, ended up making like $100 million. I want a deal like that.
Okay, so first of all, it would be really cool to have a flashy logo, and honestly, street art can be a really phenomenal statement. It can be an amazing way to showcase attitude and fresh style and sometimes elegance, sometimes raw, culture and everything like that. Honestly, having a street artist come through and add that authenticity, that character, that stylization, and that personality, really, to a logo can be really great. We've reached this kind of plateau in the way that things are styled. It's called a modern design. It's very thin lines for separators. It's usually very, very limited in color palette. It's often grays, maybe some muted earth tones, things like that, depending on if you're going for a more tech view or if you're looking at a more earthy view or whatever. Your primary colors or your main colors for your color palette are going to be slightly different. So you might have some greens, some browns, tans, etc. Maybe an accent color with a little bit bolder of a feel. But if you're in the tech space, it's a lot of grays, maybe some slight blues. You might touch a little bit of green here and there if you're really reaching outside the box. But it's a lot of that millennial gray that we saw in a lot of the interior design movement in the mid-teens, maybe a little bit sooner or a little bit earlier. And it's really disappointing. I've actually been looking for UI packs for quite a while that have a little bit more character to them, a little bit more feel, rather than just the exact same look constantly. And granted, the modern design has come about because of efficiency and because of accessibility reasons and workflows. So when people work with a software, it's usually from left to right, top to bottom, which is how many languages read, primarily English. And if you look at a lot of the tech companies that are in the United States, and those are the ones that I can speak to primarily, those people are speaking primarily English. However, because of that uniform way in which we consume information, we've distilled from that this very samey, very homogeneous feel. You see it in what's known as a dashboard feel. And that dashboard view is fine. It does a lot of great things as far as getting information to you quickly, but it also is emotionless. It doesn't have any kind of projection of any kind of attitude or personality of the company that built it or the user. The most you can do in most customization systems is change some colors here and there, which is fine, I guess, but there's a lot to be desired looking for a way to make your own statement. Having a street artist come through and design a logo for you is awesome. Is it worth stock options? Hell no. Absolutely not. If this company becomes billions and billions and billions of dollars in net worth or in stock market purchases or allocations, whatever, that artist didn't do anything else for the business. That artist built the logo, which is arguably one of the most important marketing tools in the entire space, but it's still just the logo. Companies change logos all the time. Look at how many times Google has changed their logo. Look at how many times we've seen logo changes from Amazon, from Microsoft, etc. Those logos change all the time. So having an artist come through and design a logo from the ground up and get stock options for it, absolutely not. If you've got an artist that's trying to get that on you or get that from you, back away. Just back away and say, nope, we'll find somebody else. And here's one other thing that I want to say, and that is, with the advent of AI, with image generation coming through artificial intelligence systems, it sounds really cool, and it seems like a phenomenal tool for the artistically challenged individual. Like myself, I'm not a particularly good artist. I can convey meaning and I can sketch some things out, but largely, I'm not a great artist. So I tend to lean on friends. I tend to lean on colleagues. I tend to look for people that can do that work, and I pay them when I can. And I make sure that they understand right up front, this is what my budget is. This is how much I can afford. If you go over this, I won't be able to pay you until I can pay you, which I can't guarantee right now, kind of deal, right? You want to make sure that you are being as open and honest and upfront. Artists put in a lot of work to make sure that the item that they're putting out there is worthy of their signature and is worthy of their client and the money being exchanged. Artists are real people that spend hours upon hours upon hours building something that our systems are going to be using for recognition. They should be paid for that work. They should be paid fairly for that work. I understand we don't always have the money. That sucks. Hop on Fiverr, find a special deal, whatever you can to get the artwork that you need. But understand that in art, many times you get what you pay for. If you want to use AI, I don't advise it. I would highly recommend you hire a real artist, because AI is always going to be derivative. It's always going to miss the mark a little bit, and it's always going to be a little bit controversial, if not a whole lot of controversy, right? So stay out of the AI space when it comes to art, especially, and start working towards getting artists that actually have the feel and the attitude and the personality that can convey your message to your clientele. AI sucks when it comes to image generation stuff. And honestly, in a lot of places, at least in the US, as far as I know federally, I could be wrong on this, but I believe federally speaking, you cannot use AI generated artwork as a logo or a copyright logo. So you can't copyright something generated by AI. So heads up there, go to a real artist, save yourself the headache, and you'll be a lot better off.
Who's that dude?
Nobody, he's the coder.
You got a Latino working for you? That's cool, yo. Not a lot of Latinos working in tech.
Yeah, he's Latino. Yeah. And he's one of the best coders we have. He kind of adds a Latin flair to the company.
I hope this goes without saying. Don't lie about the ethnicity of your employees. Don't. Lying has never gotten anybody into a beneficial position for very long. They almost always, if not always, get found out. And before you bring up politicians, I'm talking about people. But legitimately, don't lie about your employees or your skill sets. Don't lie about what you can and cannot do. Don't lie about ethnicities or diversity or anything like that. Make it darn clear, nope, he's not Latino. I don't want to misrepresent. I don't want to. If you put all your cards out like that, most people will respect it, and the people that don't, you don't want to be working with anyway. I really wish that I could play any of the intro music for these episodes, but as it is, every episode that I've uploaded has been hit by the automatic copyright claim from HBO, and I've had to appeal every single one of them. And thankfully, they've been cool. They've let it go on manual review, but it always takes a couple of days. But I wish I could play those songs because they are straight bangers. I love the intro music every time. It's sick.
You promised this guy $10,000 without any approval. Are you high?
A little bit, yeah, but that's irrelevant.
No,
A
it's
cool
very
company
relevant.
Needs a cool logo. You think those guys over at Nucleus are hiring a convicted felon to paint a mural on their garage?
For $10,000? No. Look, I took a run at a burn-down chart.
some logos can be quite expensive. I think $10,000 is probably steep. But I know of some artists that will charge in the $3 to $4, sometimes $5,000 range. And if you want to own the rights to that logo, that can be even more expensive depending. And obviously that depends on the artist, that depends on their skill level, their experience, the amount of time they spend on the logo. There are a lot of revisions. 10 grand for a logo without cross checks. I wouldn't be doing that ever. On top of that, Ehrlich makes a really solid point, actually, that if they had a convicted felon or somebody that is getting back on their feet that has been through the punitive system in the United States, a lot of people actually respect that. When you are clearly supporting somebody that's trying to get back on their feet, it tends to look really good on the company. In this case, the guy is obviously tagging, which is, I think in most cases, a misdemeanor. I don't think it's a felony, but maybe not the greatest look. But if they are somebody that's been through the system or somebody that is trying to recover from being in that system or the life prior to being in the system, then a lot of people will look very favorably on that. Those people still need jobs. Those people still need support, and they need help in order to be able to make ends meet and in order to continue getting better. It's a really funny thing, and honestly shouldn't be too revelatory for most people, that if you don't have money, it's really easy to slide into a lifestyle that gets you money so that you can pay your bills. Big surprise. So if they're doing legitimate work for you and they're getting paid legitimate money for it, the odds of them staying legitimate or being encouraged to continue staying legitimate goes up pretty steeply. You should probably look into supporting those people as long as they are legitimate and everything is on the up and up. Just saying. So what we have here is a burn down chart, and it's exactly what he said it was and has it labeled as. Makes sense that the effort remaining is the y-axis here, the vertical one. The bottom axis is going to be time. That's typically how those are read. We have an actual effort and a remaining effort under ideal circumstances. Typically, the remaining, or rather the ideal line, is going to be in gray. In this case, it's in blue. This is remaining in the ideal time frame if everything is met as exactly expected on timelines, which is never the case. That's okay. In a burn down chart, the idea is to gather data so that we can tell whether or not we are being efficient and matching what our goals are. So having the actual red line in the upper left there, really, really short. They have the DRM there. That's fine. The remaining time there is a little bit more jagged than I would have expected. I guess depending on licensure and being able to secure partnerships for hosting. In this case, they're talking about cloud deployment right around the middle, near the bottom of the screen for us, but the middle of the chart there. So they're probably going to be looking at something like AWS, which would be Amazon Web Services. They could be looking at Azure Cloud, which is a Microsoft product. They could be looking at the Google Development Console or their dev space. I think that's what it's called. But those are their cloud providers. But the jaggedness in this ideal line tells me that they are building in some kind of padding, so to speak, that shows that they are not going to be able to put out a whole lot of output or do a whole lot of work during those times, because the amount of work that's left is decreasing a little bit, but it's not decreasing as rapidly as the prefix or the postfix to that drop. So I hate this overlay on HBO Max because it takes forever to go away. We have a much shallower slope here than we would here, or than we do here rather. And so that means that we're not getting as much work done, or we're not getting the work done as rapid of a pace as in these two sections before and after it, but we are still getting some done. So that tells me that that's probably going to be something like a QA phase, because this is going to be effort that is more deliverable, more demonstrable, whereas in many cases QA effort which is undersung, but QA effort might indicate that we are not getting as many deliverables, but we are getting work done, effort done. This could be going through legal or going through some sort of licensure agreements with partnered programs, ads, things like that, waiting for contracts to come through. This could be a pre-alpha or beta, and then we get a bunch more development work based on the results of those tests or those pre-releases. Then we actually do a full cloud deployment for us to go live. And then after that, we have more work to be done. That's typically aftermath or post-release bug fixes, stability fixes, analysis, things like that. And then out of funds, clearly that's when the check that Peter Gregory wrote for them is at zero. And that includes all of the money for their software, their hardware, and their paychecks. Then after that, they are into debt, which we saw in a previous episode with some of Peter Gregory's other beneficiaries. I think that's what they would be called. His other investments coming forward saying that one of their plants went sideways and they needed some more funding. That absolutely happens. This is a fairly realistic burn down chart. Kudos to Jared for putting this together. Clearly, it's a show. I get it. But kudos to the character in this case putting this together, because showing this analysis really proves and really shows the real data that we're dealing with, the real reflection of our efforts, and the real work that's being done according to what needs to be done, or against and compared to the ideal timeline. It's a very useful tool. And a lot of people take a lot of offense to it because they see the actual slope not matching up with the ideal slope, and they come up with a bunch of excuses. Don't worry about that. What you should be worried about is how close you are getting to that ideal, not that you match it exactly. If you can match it exactly, that's incredible, and it's also most often impossible. So don't worry about that. Focus on trying to match the trend as best you possibly can. And remember, the x-axis, the lateral one at the bottom, that is time. So that never stops. Just keep moving along, keep making progress, and keep making things.
All right, well, what did he say when you told him I wasn't Mexican?
I didn't.
And why not?
Because I wanted him to paint our garage for cheap.
I genuinely don't know how to respond to that.
You know, I'm not going to take...
I didn't realize that this was for a garage door. I don't know how I feel about that, honestly. I'll have to think about that one.
Take the bait here. I am not a racist, all right? I watch a lot of black porn. I mean, a lot.
One question. In this porn, is the man black or the woman black, or are they both?
Is one of those racist and the others aren't?
I'll hack his browser history. We'll get to the bottom of this.
This house is chaos. I gave up a great job in stock options at Hooley to come here because I thought Pied Piper could be viable, but it never will be unless we make some changes. We need to operate like a business, or we're not going to...
Yeah, I have a feeling that Jared is going to struggle here. Clearly, I don't know the rest of the story, but I have a feeling he's going to struggle. Giving up a great job to go work for a startup is already tough enough, but when the startup is acting like they're just a house of guys trying to do cool stuff is really bad. It's not the way to go. He's absolutely right. It needs to start radically changing into a business. And that doesn't mean that it needs to radically go to Hooley levels of business or start behaving so clinically and so clean room-y all the time. But there's a reason that many businesses go that direction, because of efficiency, because of data analytics, because of being able to track how your projects are going. When you have a startup of just a bunch of guys in a house trying to do cool stuff, it's incredibly expensive and inefficient. Not in the millions of dollars expensive monetarily, but comparatively, the amount of work to the amount of income is really low. If they don't get a product to market very quickly and beat out Hooley, they're going to run into big problems. Additionally, putting the name for Pied Piper into that competition for the startup can cause a lot of issues, because even though they are a startup and they would like more seed money, they run the risk of pushing out Peter Gregory. They run the risk of turning off any other investors. It's not super frequent, but when you have a singular investor, you don't want to put a bad taste in their mouth, so to speak. And that's not to say that you want to do nothing but bow to them and say that you'll do whatever they want. You still need to have your personality and your style for your company, for your technology, whatever. But going to a startup to get seed, or a startup competition to get seed money, it's a very different thing rather than going in and already having an investor. I hope that Richard withdraws, because if he doesn't, it could cause a lot of problems.
Peter Gregory's already funding him. Why would he let Richard do this? It makes no sense.
I don't know. I didn't even know Richard got in.
Is Peter Gregory toying with me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's sort of fading.
Hello?
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 I'm hearing you. It's just the image is...
Nelson, shut up for a second. If you can hear me...
Make a gesture.
Is it... I hear you. Is this...
I have no idea what you're saying, Nelson. Nelson. Can you help me, please?
Great freeze frame. Honestly, I get so sick and tired of the same trope. Video calling is janky, yes, but you have to understand the amount of data that gets transmitted between your audio and your video. It's a lot, and for a lot of PCs, it can be a lot to try to render, let alone having some sort of custom hardware thing for 3D projection. It's not necessary. Even if we had the two-way communication as holograms, why? In my opinion, it's a waste of money, and it's really dumb. And it's not going to reach consumers for a long time, if it ever does. And if it does, it's still going to be hyper expensive and unnecessary. The flat screens that we have now do the job just fine. And especially in a world where it's completely mobile, where we have our phones that can do all of the video calling we want, it's a no-brainer to just do it that way. Otherwise, I mean, it's not like you can touch. I'd rather we spend more money on teleportation or actually trying to make travel between countries and states and things like that faster, rather than whatever this crap is. That said, on the actual episode, talking about what's happening in this conversation, yeah, it makes sense that he's trying to get information, that Gavin Nelson or Newsom or whatever his name is, Gavin is trying to get more information on why Pied Piper is trying to enter into the TechCrunch competition. It makes sense that he's asking Nelson or Big Head. It makes sense that he is trying to understand Peter Gregory's motives, because he would think that this would come from Peter Gregory, because as far as I can tell, they were friends at one point, and now they're not, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. But I hate this trope, and Nelson, Big Head, really shouldn't be saying anything. He should be saying just what he is right now. I don't know why he's entered in. Didn't realize he got in. That doesn't make sense, and that he should leave it at that. But he's got a contract. Write out the contract. Work on your own software. Find a way to do it, within the bounds of the company, and then launch and have a fallback, like I said in the last episode.
That's better. Sorry.
See?
The telehuman is
Way
a
better.
great piece of technology. Unfortunately, the broadband isn't that great out here in rural Wyoming. That presents a great business opportunity.
It does present a great business opportunity if the people in Wyoming want that. If they are a rural community and they want to stay a rural community and they don't want that connectivity, don't market to them. Don't even try. But put out a couple of feelers, put out a couple of questionnaires, see if people are interested. And if they are, look at investing and look at bringing that technology to them. You want to win people over? Find a way to solve their problems, not introduce problems for you to solve to make you look like Superman. Also, in the telehuman thing, they had the weird filters where the face was bigger or whatever, the hands were bigger. It all seems kind of goofy and silly. It doesn't really make sense. It throws me off. It makes me feel awkward, because that's not what happens when software glitches. What we're seeing here with the pixelation and the freeze frames and then it pops back in, that's much more realistic. That's actually what happens.
Guys, I guess you didn't see the sign. We're actually having a meeting here.
Congratulations.
It's sort of for management only.
Are you fucking serious right now? Are you really kicking us out?
Well, I thought maybe you guys could just take your food into the living room.
So you want to have a meeting in the room where all the food is, while we eat our food in the room where all the computers are?
Guys, just 5 minutes, please.
Okay, you see this?
I have a thought. My issue here is injected culture. A lot of companies try to define what their culture is and try to stick to that without adapting it. Your company, as it grows, is going to change. The person that you are today starting a company versus the person you are in 10 years at a successful company is very different, especially depending on the number of employees you have. When you are 5 guys in a house building an app and you release it, you're still 5 guys in a house that built an app and released it, and you're now making money, hopefully. But it ends up being a very bro-y or a very laid-back and relaxed kind of culture. And as you gain more employees, as you gain more diversity, as you gain more of a public presence, you end up with a lot more need for ratification of a consistent culture. Now, there's a difference between employee culture and corporate culture. And in a lot of cases, companies try to push their corporate culture and then don't care about the employee culture. That happens when you don't listen to employees. That happens when you don't listen to the needs or the wants or the voices of the people that make the money for your company to exist and succeed and do well. What Jared is putting forward here is ratifying that corporate culture, and I don't like that. The culture should be distilled from the attitudes of the people that work on the app. That said, hierarchy is incredibly important. And I keyed in on this, or I noted it earlier in the series, which is funny because we're only on episode 5, that I didn't care for Guilfoyle's attitude and that the company would run into issues with his F the man kind of mentality. It's a problem because when you have 3 people that are in management, or you have people that are trying to build the business and he just wants to give them the middle finger all the time, it ends up screwing everybody over. He becomes what's known as a dissenter. And those dissenters can cause a lot of problems because you can't get work done, no matter how hard you want to. And it sucks because he is also one of their more talented developers, let alone one of their only ones. I'm going to let Jared finish with his thought, but I have a feeling that it's been mislabeled as culture when it's actually supposed to be power hierarchy. Technically, at this point, Ehrlich and Richard are the bosses of Dinesh and Guilfoyle. They don't respect them as bosses, but they're still the bosses. So technically, those 2 could be ousted, and Ehrlich and Richard could find somebody or 2 new people to replace them. Just saying.
They are wasting an enormous amount of time arguing. What if we were to separate them, right? Divide their existing workspace into 2 areas. We could put in some kind of portable barrier.
He's talking about cubicles.
We're not doing cubicles. No way.
No. Don't think of it as a cubicle. Just think of it as a neutral colored enclosure about yay high around your workspace. Okay, fine. But do you know who uses cubicles? Every single Fortune 500 company. Why? Because they work.
He's trying to turn us into...
They're also incredibly expensive, as it happens. Why not, hear me out, just have them code in their bedrooms? It's an incubator house. You don't need cubicles. You need to give them an office space or a space where they can shut the door and go heads down if they need to. Cubicles suck. Cubicles suck.
Chewy's here.
No, and this is the craziest one of all. I mean, we're really about to spend $10,000 on a logo we could generate in-house for free? It's madness. You want a logo? Here. Just there. I just saved this company $10,000.
Accept
Are
it.
you fucking serious? Lowercase letters? Twitter, lowercase t. Google, lowercase g. Facebook, lowercase f. Every fucking company in the Valley has lowercase letters. Why? Because it's safe. But we aren't going to do that. We're going to go with Chewy.
I'm going to laugh my butt off if Chewy just puts a couple of lowercase p's in a box on the garage door. I'm going to laugh so hard.
Unless any of you gringos wants to go out there and tell a guy with 3 assault convictions that we're not going to give him the money we promised him. That's what I thought. I mean, God.
Should not have promised him 10 grand. Should not have said 10 grand was okay at all. And your logo shouldn't be going on your garage door. I've finally made up my mind. Don't label or brand your house other than maybe a yard sign or like a more significant or elegant yard sign maybe, but don't paint your house with a logo of your business, because what happens if you change the logo? Then it's going to cost you another 10 grand anyway. Get your logo on shirts, hats, stickers, laptops, whatever. I don't care. Not your house.
Are you still enjoying your asparagus, sir?
I was never enjoying it. I only eat it for the nutrients. You may take it.
I actually enjoy asparagus. A little bit of salt, a little bit of butter.
Shit.
Oh.
Peter, I don't want to upset you, but Gavin Belson just walked in.
You know, I almost forgot. I saw that Pied Piper is in the startup battlefield at TechCrunch Disrupt.
Oh, no.
It inspired me to call TechCrunch and offer to be their keynote speaker. They were quite accommodating, especially when I said that I'd make the event the grand unveiling of Nucleus.
This is displeasing.
Yep.
I have never seen him so incensed. What the hell were you thinking, Richard? How could you not tell us that you entered TechCrunch Disrupt?
I applied before I even met you guys. I wasn't going to say anything because I was going to withdraw.
No, you're not.
I'm not? Why not?
Because of you, Gavin Belson is debuting Nucleus at TCD. If you pull out, it looks like Peter is running away from Gavin.
Additionally, this is their one opportunity to actually show that there's a competitor to Nucleus if they can get a showcase prior to the keynote. On top of that, though, they've got a big issue with their corporate culture / hierarchy power struggle, with the unreadiness of their app. They may not be ready to actually show anything here. That's a big problem. They need to get their butts in gear. They need to polish up what they can and create a pre-alpha or a beta and display that. Get that in the hands of actual users, power users and standard users alike, and see what feedback they can get. Take that feedback into account and build something better. Additionally, they should be looking for somebody to do UI. Either get rid of Guilfoyle or find a way to get a new UI person to build something that's clean, something that's useful, something that has personality that people can use easily. UI people and back-end developers are very different people, and it shows when you see their products. I would love to see this conversation turn into Peter Gregory saying, well, how much do you need for a UI person? How much do you need for a QA or something along those lines? I will give you this check for this amount of money for this purpose, kind of deal.
So, like it or not, you are presenting a live demo in front of the world in 8 weeks.
A live demo of what? I entered TCD with an early build of Pied Piper when it was still just a music app. No, sorry, executive decision. We are not doing TechCrunch.
Okay.
You can't executively decide that if your investor is saying you're going to do it, unless you want your check pulled.
So let me just tell you what's going to happen. Peter will pull all of his support and pass on any further funding.
And you conveniently forgot to mention any of this when you were convincing me to turn down $10 million? And now I'm in the middle of some pissing contest between two billionaires?
In fairness, Gavin only offered you the $10 million because we started pursuing you.
Yeah, but he offered it to me, Monica. He offered it to me, $10 million, and I didn't take it. Because you came to me when I was puking and freaking out and told me that Peter Gregory believed in me, when in reality he didn't even give a flying fuck.
Richard.
Oh my God, I didn't...
He's not wrong. He should be angry. And she clearly misrepresented the interest of Peter Gregory in order to piss off a competitor. He has a right to be pissed. I would be.
Turned down $10 million because of Peter Gregory, Monica. I turned it down because of you.
However angry he is, I am 1/10 as angry. We're just gonna have to, what the good fuck?
What is happening? Is that Dinesh?
Is that the Statue of Liberty? And there's penetration. Oh, hey neighbor. Ashley's getting big. She looks...
Oh my god. It is so much worse than I thought. That is... Oh. That's horrendous. That's horrendous.
All right, here's the real shit, Chewy. You know, our prize coder, he's actually not Latino.
What?
Yeah, point of fact is he's Pakistani.
Holmes, you lied to me.
No. You thought he was Latino, and I thought that I would be racist telling you were wrong. Look, Chewy, painting a guy named Dinesh Chugtai as an Aztec warrior just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, you know what? I think you might be right, boss.
Great. That's,
He's going to redo it, but instead of an Aztec outfit, it's going to be something Pakistani, I'm sure.
We're just taking a little break. DRM is now a thing of beauty.
Wait, you did DRM?
Yeah?
I did DRM.
Why did you do DRM? I said I would do DRM, you would do error handling.
Anything to do with errors sounds like your whole vibe.
Yeah, I handle errors
Scrum?
every day.
Two things. One, Scrum. Two, they do need more solid communication. Scrum, in this size of a team, does not necessarily make sense. Scrum is a platform by which developers can iterate on their communications and continually improve at a regular pace that is monitorable and deliverable for the use of the existing software for deployment at a regular pace. There's the corporate drivel. The idea is that Scrum allows you to meet in stand-ups that are supposed to be no longer than, I think it's like 15 minutes. It's like 5, 10, 15-minute increments, whatever. And then you have those daily. Then you have retro meetings. So after you've pushed out, after usually a 2-week period, you push out a release and then you retro on it, see what went well, what went poorly, and then you have pre-planning or sprint planning. You have to create item cards. I actually have some item cards on my whiteboard that is on the door that you probably can't see in my camera currently. It's a big song and show. It's a big dance of nothing but meetings. Here's the thing. If you have a team that can communicate decently via instant message or in a meeting, fine. If you have clear-cut responsibilities, great. If you have work items on a whiteboard, in a software, or whatever, great. Guess what? You don't need Scrum, because Scrum just says you need to do all those things, and you need to meet, and you have to release something every 2 weeks. And every tech company has said, hey, let's take that and implement about a third of it and call it good. And they bastardize it and screw it up in such a way that it makes it impossible to get anything done at any kind of decent pace. And if you're a maintenance team, like a bug fix team, a triage team, a QA team, or anything like that, Scrum actually doesn't make sense. You know what does? Kanban. 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 Because it allows you to take from a pile of crap that needs to be done, get it done, push it out, and call it good. I prefer Kanban. in most cases. Scrum has its place, and it's in the trash can most of the time. And the t-shirt sizing or the work item sizing that goes with Scrum is a bunch of crap, piece of crap workflow that makes managers feel good about stuff that they're not doing because the developers are wasting their time talking to the managers and telling them every little detail about what was done. Instead, they could have been working on getting the next things done so that the next release would go much more smoothly. Scrum is a reaction to a lack of planning. You should be planning things, designing them, building them, testing them, then pushing them out. That's the simple way. But managers wanted to get in our way. Simple as that.
Yes, Scrum.
So, from rules-based filtering.
So here we are. Just like I was saying. On a whiteboard, on a chalkboard, on a software, whatever. There are a ton of softwares out there, from Jira to Monday.com to Azure DevOps boards to Trello, whatever. Trello's free if you want to see the BS that it can be. Now, granted, actually, I'll rescind that statement. Trello is not bad for home use or for individual use. It's fine. Jira, Azure, whatever, those softwares, they're great for being able to track work items, keep track of the history, what was done, how it was done, what came back, etc. That's great for auditing tools and improving. Great. You should have a software like that with all of your work items outlined as best you can. If you have new ones crop up, add them to it. If they are items that cropped up while you're working on another item and they are related, you can do that in most softwares. This also works just fine. Just throwing them on sticky notes on the board, fine. Totally fine. But the Scrum architecture is what I hate the most. So let's take a look at the Scrum board that they've got here. So the pink sticky notes, these are kind of what's known as like an epic or a larger bucket. So cloud architecture design would be like a big to-do, like a big bucket. Inside of that you would have capture, I'm guessing capture what the existing architecture is or what's necessary. Bulk load, this is probably having a large amount of data that needs to be uploaded or hydrated into the system. Something is cut off here, but it says, for example, filtering for that. Okay. So filtering is fine. I'm guessing that's probably some sort of censorship or some sort of protective measure that the law may require. File introspection, that's probably tracking the metadata of the file and seeing what information is there, maybe the quality of the compression compared to the original. Then we move on to the next bucket, which would be configure, development, test, production instances. These are also known as environments. These are a really solid list of environments to have. So your development is where all your code is going to be built against. Your test is going to be making sure that everything that is stably deployed by the development branch is going to go through automation and manual testing. Your production environment is going to be what users end up leveraging. There is another branch that could be added here, which is known as a model office branch. This would be in between test and production. This would be the stable deployments of all of the test items that are going to go to production. It's basically a staging environment. You would take all of the work items or all of the branches that you want from the test environment, package them or tag them in your version control system, typically in Git, and then you would bundle those and push those up to production. So production will always be behind Model Office. Model Office will always be behind test. Test will always be behind development. It's a really solid way to go. If you don't want to use a Model Office or a staging branch, that's totally fine. Just know that you could run into issues where things don't play nicely between the test and the production app. Your test branch may be further forward than you want, in which case I would offer that you should look at launching features in a dark manner or doing something called a dark release, which is where you introduce feature toggles or feature flags that you can turn off certain features, specifically your new ones, push them up to production, and then turn them on one at a time at timed increments. So maybe 1-2 weeks after production goes live, 1-2 weeks after that, and then the next one 2 weeks after that, and so on and so forth. This allows you time to have the production environment stabilize and verify that features are not clashing with one another. So under that, they have event notifications, they have ingestion telemetry, they have scaling, quality of service. Yeah, QoS. That's fine. Telemetry is not something that I do a whole lot of or know a ton about. I haven't needed to. Event notification, that's probably something like a gRPC or like an API event, maybe. It could also just be notifications that are going out to users when a file is uploaded or done uploading. Something scaling in QoS, that's probably going to be like load balancing. That's going to be making sure that their software doesn't blow up the bigger that they get. Scaling can happen in a number of different ways. The two primary ways are node expansion and lateral expansion. Node expansion is essentially what we see in things like Mongo or NoSQL databases. They're basically document databases. Those systems will allow you to essentially add a new computer to a whole bunch of computers side by side and store your information or store your system side by side. When you need to add more capability to it, you just add a new node to it. The other way is lateral, or I guess technically it's vertical scaling, but it's upgrading the hardware within your hosting system. Now, when you're working with something like AWS or Google Cloud Development Console, if you're working with Azure, things like that, in many cases, they handle all of the hardware infrastructure, and all you have to do is pay more money and click a couple of buttons, check a couple of boxes, hit OK to sign your credit card up for it or whatever, and they will add more resources to whatever your instance is. So that's what that is. Determine all, see, here, I didn't even see it, but they are going to be using AWS, so Azure Web Services. Determine all AWS services required. That's a really solid one. That is going to take quite a bit of work, actually, and determining the cost that's associated with that. That can be quite costly. Some instances I've worked with on a small scale are projected to be around $500 to $600 per month. Some of the larger scale ones can be in the tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on what the need is for the software. But that epic or that overall view is going to be absolutely required. Initial test data load, that's just making sure that they can pass a larger data set into their system and make sure that the system doesn't crash. It's called load balancing or load testing. It kind of goes into that scaling QoS I just talked about. Performance tests, that's going to be kind of the same thing. That might rope in the UI side of things. May not, because they're working with a compression algorithm primarily, but performance tests are going to be pretty important, but it does kind of bleed into the initial test of the data load and the QoS and scaling. And then design and load database schema. That should be, that I would say after cloud architecture and design, this should be probably moved over and underneath that one. And then your configure development test and production instances probably right directly after that. Your design and load database schema. There are two ways to develop programs that kind of leverage these same systems. The first one is you can do database first, where you build out your entire schema and database stuff. That's basically your skeletal structure for where the data is going to live. And then you build the code to work with that. The other way to go about it is code first, where you actually develop the system, and then you can use things like migrations or database migrations to take that code architecture or that style and build the database right off that code. And a lot of people really like that one. I don't like that one all the time, but I also don't like database first all the time. It really depends on what I'm doing. So pick the tool that works best for your instance or what you're doing, and you'll be fine. But in this case, personally, I would prefer to create the database first and then build off of that. Hi there, Editor Me here. It's the next day, I'm editing, and I realized that I totally did not go into when or why I would use code first versus database first versus other technologies. As a quick caveat, I want to say, again, I am primarily a .NET developer. That means that I primarily work with Microsoft products and in the C#.NET framework. These are Windows specific in most cases, though since .NET 5 or 6, I think it was 6, we've been able to deploy .NET or C# developed applications for Linux and Apple products to varying levels of success, and with a couple of different technologies like Xamarin, Maui, etc. So we can develop, but for those projects, for those systems and platforms. However, for the most part, our development targets the Windows machine and Linux if we're doing servers and things. However, irrelevant. What is relevant is that I am typically using Entity Framework, which is an ORM, which is an object relational mapping tool. Basically, it takes whatever your schema is, whatever your database looks like with all the tables and everything, and it puts them together into C# objects. This is going to be something that I can showcase a little bit more in depth if you're interested. I'm not going to hydrate this video with a technical demo, but if you are interested, let me know in the comments. I hate it typically when people on YouTube say that, but I really don't know of a better way to get your feedback. But let me know if that's something that you're interested in seeing. Maybe a video of me actually coding, a video of me talking through the architectural decisions and things like that. Let me know. In this case, though, we're using a database-first approach because I think it makes the most sense. We already have an existing system that is working at least on a one-off basis. So the idea is that Richard, in his development of his compression algorithm, has selected a singular file and run it through his compression algorithm and then viewed the output to verify and to confirm that it is compressing and streaming in a lossless ratio, which would be a 1-to-1 ratio, right? At least I'm pretty sure that's how that compression ratio would work. In the scenario here where we have an existing system that's working with a one in, one out kind of deal, this would be what I would consider a proof of concept. Building a database around that to house more and more information like Dropbox would, like OneDrive would, and so on, we would need to be able to store user account information, their individual files, potentially with a certain length of time. If we were going the long-lived content concept like we would with Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, etc., then we would need to be able to associate those for an indefinite amount of time, or let the user know that after so many weeks, months, or years, that file would be offloaded from the service because of lack of use or something along those lines. In order to be able to intelligently decide whether or not a file gets to stay or needs to go, be purged, etc., we need to have a lot of data around that item. How many users are using that particular link or that particular file? How many users are accessing it per day, per month, per year, etc.? Is it a private? Is it a public? Is it internal? Is it shareable at all? Is it not, kind of deal? Is it archived? If it's archived, it might be slated for deletion after a 6-month period or something along those lines. All of that information needs to be stored somewhere. For this particular instance, I could absolutely see it being a Mongo database or something similar, but for a lot of people, they're going to be using relational. In my case, I am most familiar with relational databases, and I've only done proof of concept apps using document-based databases like Mongo, CouchDB, and Couchbase, which would essentially store an entire snapshot of all of your information as a JSON file, which is a JavaScript object notation file. Very common for APIs and things like that to use that. So we need to store all that information. A document database for this would make a lot of sense, because once you change something in that document after saving it, you would then save it again and you would have two documents rather than updating the existing records in your database. It's not that big of a deal either way. It just, with a relational database, you want to have an audit log and almost like a cold storage or an archival log, and that table can become very expansive very, very quickly. So it can be a little bit too much, whereas with a non-SQL or a NoSQL database, you get the snapshot of the documents and you can just age out the previous documents whenever you want to. I would use something like that here rather than a relational database, but it could go either way. But the fact is they have an existing system or a proof of concept that they need to take data from and build the schema out. I could see a case for code first. However, when you're working with code first, you would typically want to be writing the objects in a specific way where they are kind of following the Java bean approach, which would say, hey, we want all of our objects to be as self-enclosed or self-important as possible. So we don't have a bunch of utility classes. We don't have a bunch of static classes outside of them. An object owns its own thing. This file has its own runtime. It has its own playback speed. It has its own compression ratio or whatever. It has its own file name. Sure, but it also then has its own play. It has its own pause. It has its own dispose, etc. in order to free up resources or handle that file specifically. So the object would have all of that information. Well, then you would have to have each of your objects have that save, that I guess we would call it CRUD. So create, read, update, delete. We would call those CRUD operations. Each one of those objects would then need to have that, or that class would need to have that user account would need to have that, etc. So in order to do that, then you have to have some form of relationship to the data. That's why we make the self-enclosed objects. And then you need to have that. And it can lead to duplicate code in many cases, but you can use things like interfaces, again, .NET space. You can use interfaces and abstract classes, things like that, in order to pull common functionality out, especially if you're using generics. But I believe they're using Java, and I'm not as familiar with generics in Java. I'm pretty sure they are a common use. I can't imagine why they wouldn't be. But again, my experience is not primarily in Java. So I would use database first because they know all the information they want to store, and they'd be able to run manual queries through something like Dapper or a strict, strongly typed SQL query or relational query if they're going that route, or build their JSON object for their document manually per every file if they wanted to, and send it to the database however they want to in that regard. If you are using a document-based database, code first or database first doesn't really matter. It's almost always going to be code first because you are going to serialize your object into a JSON document. Simple as that. If you're doing relational database, that's where you're going to go DB first or code first. But I would recommend database first for this because we only want specific information out. We don't want to have our code generate that database for us. It really does come down to how comfortable the developers are in writing SQL or writing relational database code versus writing just standard Java or .NET or whatever primary programming language they're using. That's kind of where things get murky because I'm not sure what their database skill level is. I'm sure Guilfoyle will claim that he could take down the Chinese government using his knowledge of JSON. But if that's actually true or not, who would know, right? So again, he's kind of the Call of Duty kid that says he's got 65 confirmed kills in the Marines or, Navy SEALs or something like that. Regardless, those are kind of the use cases. If I were working on a new system, then I would really weigh out my comfort level with the database I'm using. And I learned on database first, so I typically go that route. But with Entity Framework as your ORM, Entity Framework can do some weird things when you are scaffolding your database from the database itself, the schema, to code objects. It can be kind of funky and really janky. So my recommendation would actually be to start looking into learning DB contexts with EF and Entity Framework as a whole before you start jumping into the database first. That's where I started, and it has screwed me up quite a few times. But anyway, thanks for letting me interject on this one. Hope you're enjoying the video. But that's neither here nor there. Error handling, that's That makes sense. That's going to make sure that when something bad happens, you are gracefully failing out and letting the user know, hey, an error occurred, and give some detail about it. But then you log that error in your backend so that you can actually go through and double check and see what happened. Metadata extraction, that's going to be pulling information about files out of the file to view it and make sure that your headers are matching and things like that. File name.
We go to work.
File value extraction. I'm not sure what file value extraction would be. I'm not sure about that one. Rules-based filtering, that's kind of going back into this censoring or having like a TOS that allows the system to kick out things that are against TOS or whatever. And then ingestion analytics, that's going to be gathering data to make sure that we are able to see how large the file is, how long it's taking us to load that file, things like that. I'm not going to go through all the rest of the sticky notes because I only have so much time in an episode, but this is actually a pretty good view into what developers have to look at.
Workflow, at which point that card is moved from the icebox
Okay, so we can actually see their labeling here. So those were not epics. We have cloud for the pink. We have ingestion engine in the yellow. Compression engine in green. Okay. File storage services. Okay, this is making sense. Publishing services in yellow. Cool. CDN, distribution services, consumption edge. I'm not sure what consumption edge is, nor why it's in yellow as well. And operations, billing, and user management. I feel as though that the reuse of colors here might be a limitation of the colors of sticky notes they have. Go out and buy the like $10 like 30 color pack or whatever and have your different colors, or use symbols. Icebox, this is basically the big to-do, everything's on hold, don't worry about this stuff yet, we're not working on it, we're not looking at it yet. Emergency, this is, hey, this has to go out immediately, as soon as possible, as soon as stable. In progress, this is what we're currently working on. Testing, currently in testing, and then complete should be basically deployed to the next environment up. From development to testing, when it's complete, it should be in testing. When testing is complete, it should be in model office or production. That's kind of the breakdown. These vertical things are swim lanes, as I was mentioning before. And then you have your individual interests.
These stories here. How long do we think each one will take?
I don't know. Who cares? 4 hours apiece?
Yeah, maybe for you.
That's actually inaccurate. So in Scrum, you're not supposed to equate the size of a job based on how long it's supposed to take. That is a big no-no, actually, in the manifesto of Scrum. You are supposed to rate how much effort goes into something without equating it to time. Have fun with that one. How difficult is it for you to achieve a job or achieve a work item without talking about the amount of time you spent on it? Have fun with that mental abstraction, because it's BS. But the idea is that you rate it either on a t-shirt size, so small, medium, large kind of deal, maybe XL. And if it gets to XL, you're supposed to break that into smaller pieces if you can, so that it's in the small to large range, which is dumb. At a company that I worked at, we used a numerical system that followed essentially 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, so odds. And then, or no, we did have 8 in there. Maybe we did Fibonacci. I can't remember exactly how we did it. Anyway, the fact of the matter is we used numbers, and if it got above an 8, we had to cut it up. So, it's dumb. I hated it. It was a bunch of formality for very little use, and it sucked.
Guys, have you been out front yet? Because you might want to come see this.
I'm good.
Fuck off. We're working.
Wow, this took a lot of work.
I mean, I'm already smiling. Do you really have to paint me giving the thumbs up? It's gratuitous.
Really? That's the gratuitous part?
Well, and Dinesh's shaft. Oh, no. Oh, shit.
I mean, called it?
You were right. I played you a little. Maybe
She did not play him a little. She played him out of 10 million.
a lot.
There you
I
go.
got caught up in making the deal. All right, and I would like to say that I was just doing my job, but that's the excuse that the Nazis used, so I'm not really sure how effective that one is. You're the only one of Peter's companies that I've invested 10% of my annual salary in. So I really hope that you can do this.
I would be incredibly skeptical about anything she says at this point. She's already lied to him. She's already withheld information. Pulling on the heartstrings is... It could go either way. Maybe she's being incredibly sincere. Maybe she's not. If this ends up being a romance thing, that's weird. I don't think that that would be reflective of what the actual industry would be like. A lot of it is very cutthroat at that level. And when you're talking billionaires, even more so. Also, she shouldn't have invested 10% of her salary betting on you. That's also really weird.
I love it.
Well, it's lowercase, but at least it isn't racist. Is it?
It's Chuy Ramirez. I'm impressed. He sold a mural today for $500,000.
All right. There wasn't as much tech, but I felt a little bit better about this one because it was more of the daily life of the programmer and a little bit more about what goes into the actual development practice and some of the controversy and some of the difficulty that goes into dealing with management, culture, all kinds of stuff like that. The logo stuff is funny, really raunchy, but funny. Generally speaking, though, they keep it pretty accurate. When you have a bunch of guys together or a bunch of people together in a garage or in a house that don't really have a whole lot of cohesion, it can be pretty chaotic. And having systems in place like Scrum can help, but like I said, the Scrum is usually for a little bit bigger teams to get visual on the inner workings of the processes without actually working with those people individually. Upper management looking at lower rungs on the ladder, so to speak. Pretty accurate, pretty solid, and also absolutely hilarious. So stick around. Hopefully I'll have the next one up at a decent time. Sorry for the delay. Holidays and work and all kinds of other stuff has just kind of gotten in the way. So appreciate you sticking it out. And again, like I said at the beginning of the video, thank you so much for the support and the great comments and the perspective. Really appreciate it. Take it easy, y'all. And until next time, have a good one.